Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you here today with an article from The Federalist dated October 27th. And this article, it's again one of those we need to talk about how bad the media is because, as it says here, uh, no matter how much you hate the media, it's never enough. So the article says, however much you hate the media, these 7 moments in Israel coverage prove it's not enough. So I think we all know that we should hate the media, but these examples kind of prove why you should hate them even more. And there's a good if you don't follow him on X or Twitter or whatever the hell you want to call it these days, there's an account, or I should say a person named Oron McIntyre that I highly recommend you follow. But he always has something that says specifically like, think about how much you hate the media, and it's just like you should hate them more, something to that effect. But he's so right about that. Anyway, let's get into this thing. So the byline or the subheadline, whatever it's called, I don't know. I don't do journalism. Says these 7 failures from the past few weeks should dispel any benefit of the doubt you have left for the corporate media's honesty. So, get into the article. The American legacy media were busted last week for spreading terrorist propaganda about an Israeli strike on a Gaza hospital, in scare quotes, that turned out to be nothing but lies, but not before the false narrative ignited anti America and anti Israel fury around the world. The narrative laundering in what was actually a story about a parking lot being hit by Gazan insurgents' own rocket fire provided a textbook example of how our institutional media frames stories to fit their own prejudices, showing once again that however much you hate the corporate press, it's not enough. But the hospital news cycle hasn't been the only example from media coverage of the aftermath of Hamas's terror attack on Israel to drive that lesson home. Starting with, but extending far beyond, the hospital story disaster, here are 7 failures from the past few weeks that should dispel any benefit of the doubt you have left for the corporate media's honesty. And we're going into it. It says, number one, running literal terrorist propaganda. So it says nearly every major corporate outlet, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, the Associated Press, Reuters, MSNBC, Politico, Axios, and the LA Times, uncritically repeated claims from a Hamas run ministry in scare quotes, blaming Israel for an explosion near a hospital in Gaza. Not only was placing the blame on Israel a lie, so was the pretense that the blast was a direct hit on the hospital, and photos showed it actually struck the parking lot, and they claimed that the explosion killed 500 plus people. As soon as they were caught in the lie, media outlets shifted from blaming Israel outright to ambiguously claiming that Israel and Hamas were trading blame for the explosion. God, that was debunked like almost as soon as it happened, and all these places ran with it anyway. And even the New York Times was kind of like, "Oh, hey, let's just keep changing." There's a thing that shows them changing headlines over and over and over to fit the narrative. It's so bad. The New York Times is trash. Anyway, on to the New York Times says number two. New York Times dishonest from page. I wasn't even looking at this. Okay. So it says, as its peers ran with the Hamas propaganda memo that Israel had launched a strike on a Gazan hospital, it wasn't enough for the New York Times to regurgitate those claims uncritically. The outlet, having no photographic evidence of a leveled hospital, because it wasn't, deceptively ran the front page headline with a photo of a completely unrelated demolished building in a totally different city. And here's what it says Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, Palestinians say. And then let's see what this tweet here says. Focusing my eyes here. It says, look at the front page picture of the New York Times. The juxtaposition of the picture of a destroyed building and a headline about a hospital implies that it's a picture of the hospital. Yeah, that's true. It says also of note, the headline featured in the above photo was stealth edited. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. At least 3 times as the initially reported narrative fell apart. It's funny that I was talking about that and then it popped up. I wasn't even paying attention to the article. I'm stupid. Says number three, uncritically citing the Gaza Health Ministry. And that was the thing I was going to say previously as well as the Gaza Health Ministry is just Hamas, but it says, as it says here, Gaza is run by Hamas, and the region's Ministry of Health, in scare quotes, lies to advance terrorist propaganda. The false narrative about the Israeli strike that killed hundreds in a hospital being just the most famous example of recent weeks. An Israeli strike, hundreds in hospital, all being in scare quotes. So outlets were brutally embarrassed for regurgitating the sham agency's lies at face value, but it hasn't stopped many from citing the same group uncritically since then. Yeah, because it fits their narrative, that's all. As the Washington Post even ran an explainer to justify why news outlets and the UN rely on Gaza's health ministry for death tolls, because they're idiots. Even while noting the outfit is an agency of the Hamas controlled government and acknowledging that its reported death count from the explosion in the hospital parking lot was double what U.S. authorities estimated. The Post's defense of the terrorist run ministry included this incredible line. that the Gaza Health Ministry has continued to perform its core services. Hamas received support in the 2006 elections in part by promising better social services, and some analysts say the group has improved certain access of or areas of access. So yeah, running cover for terrorists is always fun. Number four, the ridiculous debate on whether babies were beheaded enough. Yeah, this one was disgusting. And all the reporters, and I see one of the names down there already, they should be pointed and laughed at and just fired for this because this is just bad. This is the same media complex that took terrorist health ministry and scare quotes at its word refused to believe reports from the Israeli military and government that Hamas attackers who decapitated civilians and burned alive whole families, including small children, could possibly be capable of beheading babies. Despite multiple heartbreaking reports that infants were found decapitated, media outlets worked to cast doubt on their validity. It says the debate reached peak absurdity when Eric Levitz of New York Magazine's Intelligencer claimed it was an overstatement to say babies were beheaded because babies were merely found headless, a fact that lends plausibility to claims of beheading, but which does not prove them. So this is how hard they're standing for terrorists. Is well, here's all the proof of it. And they're like, well, it doesn't mean that actually happened. It means it really happened, but all the other stuff that proved that this thing actually happened, well, it still may not have happened. Like these people are they're just awful. Awful people working for an awful magazine. Says five, refusing to call Hamas terrorists. Yeah, this is another fun thing. It says Iran backed terror group Hamas descended on unarmed civilians in their homes and at peaceful gatherings, murdering, raping, torturing, decapitating, and kidnapping hundreds of victims before bragging about their brutality on the internet. But the Associated Press, in its Israel Hamas topical guide, refuses to call the group or its actions terrorists. There may be a reason for that, and I'm just quickly scanning below that paragraph before I read it. It doesn't say this, but if you remember, a few years ago, the AP was found to have been they had an office in like a building where Hamas in the Gaza Strip where Hamas was actually running operations out of or something to that effect. So the AP probably kind of biased against Israel here. Because the AP acknowledges that terrorism is the calculated use of violence, especially against civilians, to create terror, to disrupt and demoralize societies for political ends. A definition Hamas's attack that left some 1,400 Israeli victims dead clearly meets, correct. It says, but insists it will avoid affixing the term to specific actions or group because the terms terrorism and terrorist haven't become politicized and are often applied inconsistently. Well, you guys are part of the problem here. Says many outlets opted to follow the AP standard, calling them as gunmen, fighters, and militants. Yeah, and that lightens uh, what they did. Okay, they're terrorists, plain and simple. This shouldn't be a difficult thing to figure out, you freaking idiots. As employing terrorist sympathizers to report on terrorists. Oh yeah, this is a fun one too. Is Issam Adwan, an AP reporter tasked with reporting on the unrest in the Gaza Strip following a Hamas unprovoked attack, is an anti-Israel activist whose reporting, unsurprisingly, repeatedly buries or omits the atrocities committed against Israel on October 7th in favor of elevating the plea of Gaza. Adwan wrote that Israel, a country he has smeared as apartheid, it's not, participant in colonialism, it's not, was building another racist regime that is so similar to the Nazis, it's not, and a now deleted social media post. So this guy, obviously, he's just sticking up for the Gazans, but he also doesn't know what he's talking about because he doesn't seem to know what those words mean, because Israel's not doing any of that. And you'd know that if you just, opened your eyes. So he's also claimed it's ignorant to bring up Hamas and its atrocities when we talk about Israeli war crimes, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing, which none of which is actually going on. There's also of note, the AP shared, yeah, here it is. The AP shared a building with Hamas in the Gaza Strip until the building was destroyed in 2021. So it's okay, that was only 2 years ago. It's not to be outdone. This is the thing I was thinking they were going to go into. The New York Times rehired a freelancer with a known history of praising some funny mustached German guy from World War II. You can see the name there. I'm not going to repeat it because, YouTube has a problem with this guy's name, even though it's basically just a name, but they use the implication for it. But anyway, it says Solomon, is it Hiji, who has contributed to the Times Gaza coverage, has made multiple social media posts celebrating the Nazi dictator, but the Times defended his work as important and impartial. Right. That's like where Bill Lumber comes in and just says, right. Turning a blind eye to Hamas sympathizing Democrats. Oh, here's the fun part. It says the Watchdog Media Research Center, which is a good website you should definitely go check out, concluded that as of October 22nd, evening broadcasts on ABC, CBS, and NBC had devoted a total of 0 seconds to covering the pro Hamas sympathies of radical Democrats in Congress. MRC analysts combed through all of ABC, CBS's, and NBC's evening newscasts from October 7th through October 22nd for any mention of the House Democrats, colloquially known as the Squad, reported Bill Diaz. D'Agostino. Man, I'm sorry you guys had to do that in the first place. You need to get a brain cleanse after that. Despite dedicating a whopping 525 minutes, which is nearly 9 hours of airtime to the ongoing tumult in Gaza, none of these three networks gave even a second to any member of the progressive cadre. Congressional Democrats like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and Cori Bush have blamed Israel for the explosion by a Gazan rocket in a hospital parking lot, called for a stopping of aid to Israel, accused Israel of war crimes, and described Israel as an apartheid state, D'Agostino noted. Tlaib has even refused to condemn Hamas, and in fact, she's gone out there, and even after the whole hospital thing was debunked, she even, I guess if you will, incited an insurrection by saying, she was the one, like if you saw a few days ago from when I'm recording this, there was a bunch of Palestinian or activists what's it called? Sorry, I got distracted for a second. There were a bunch of Palestinian activists that got arrested in the Capitol building, and it was kind of on the heels of Rashida Tlaib saying that no, basically this thing still happened, and we need to go into Congress and have them stop aid to Israel. So I guess you could say she incited an insurrection. So it says, again, she refused to even condemn Hamas, yet the broadcast networks decided these multiple Democrats' vocal sympathy for a terrorist cause wasn't worth mentioning. However much you distrust the corporate media, it's not enough. These aren't the only, and certainly are not the first, instances that prove it. So, yeah, I mean, besides everything that's happened over the last few years with a certain, disease that was going around, making people's lives miserable and killing millions of people, if that didn't make you distrust the media and or the government, I don't know what will. And this is just more of the same stuff, at least in terms of the media. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. If you have any other examples you want to provide of the media just botching the coverage that's going on with the Israel stuff, let me know in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.